So that being said, you start talking about doctrine. And I can tell you that doctrine is not everything. In fact, and you'll hear me talk about people's biggest strengths are often their biggest weaknesses. So if you have someone that's super aggressive and they're aggressive in the business world, they're making things happen, and that's a real advantage for them, but they can get over aggressive and then they end up doing stupid things and they fail.
Right.
That's one example of how your biggest strength can be your biggest weaknesses. Mm-hmm. In the SEAL teams, we really we had very limited doctrine. And it was a real big weakness for us, because if you had never run a certain type of operation before, you couldn't refer back to something and say, okay, here's the method or the written documentation of how you're supposed to do it. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty weak. That's pretty horrible. That's a big weakness. But at the same time, it was a strength, because as the battlefield changed, as we started getting tasked with missions that we had never done before, that no one had ever done before, we were very adaptable because we were used to trying to figure things out. So it's a strength and weakness. That being said, and although we did capture much of our lessons learned, this is going back to the book here, Basic Field Manual, talking about all these manuals that capture the doctrine. Knowledge is fine, but it is useless without common sense. Common sense is of greater value than all the words in the book. And this is another thing they will stereotypically put in Hollywood movies about cops or about soldiers. You know, you've got some guy that's buy the book. And you can see this is calling it out. This is Colonel Armour R. Sims, a guy that was in the Marine Corps on Guadalcanal. And he said that common sense was more important than anything in the field manuals, which is something I completely agree with. And to carry that point a little bit further, back to the book, and here's a quote from Major General Fuller. The central ideas of an army is known as its doctrine, which to be sound must be based on principles of war, and which to be effective must be elastic enough to admit of mutation in accordance with change in circumstance. So again, all these people that really understand war, they know that this doctrine is something that needs to be written, it needs to exist, but it needs to be adapted to. And common sense is the superior rank over doctrine.